from your experience, and then it would be interesting that Rinsola tell us what is her perspective as somebody who is politically engaged in public life, and what were the challenges of engaging young people.
Good morning, everyone. Well, in Nigeria, our situation is slightly different. We've been in a democracy since 1999. This is the Fourth Republic. It's been uninterrupted for about 19 years now, thankfully, and we're gearing up for elections again next year. Are young people apathetic? I think to a degree they are, but then are young people also participating? Again, to a degree they are. In the All Progressives Congress, which is the party of President Muhammadu Buhari, we have a number of young people playing different roles within the party and in the government also, although we believe the level of participation could be better. However, we have a large mass of young Nigerians who want nothing to do with politics, and that's for a number of reasons. Politics, where I come from, is very expensive. It's one thing to support a candidate, it's one thing to register to join a party, but the cost of participation is very high. And in a country where we have high levels of unemployment and limited job opportunities, it seems like being politically active is not the priority. Most young people would rather focus on getting jobs and being self-sufficient before then delving into politics. And then another thing is, youth in Nigeria is defined between the age bracket of 18 and 35. In other developed countries, that's usually 18 and 24. But with us, it's 18 to 35 because of so many issues, like the age at which we attain self-sufficiency. It's much later in most cases than in developed countries where there are more opportunities. Another problem with the political scene back home is violence. Things could get really violent really quickly, and for a lot of young people whose parents struggled a lot during the military era, I am one of them, it seems as if maybe staying out of the system altogether is the wiser thing to do if you're concerned about your safety. However, one thing I tell everyone is we cannot continue to complain about the kind of representation we have or about the kind of system that we have to fight in if we're not willing to join that system and try to change it. I don't believe in violence, a lot of us don't believe in violence, but if we cede the stage to people who do, nothing is going to be different. So we need to actually get into the political scene in order to infuse the system with that ideology that we believe in. Furthermore, we have discriminatory laws. For instance, presently, you have to be 30 to run for office in Nigeria. That's for state assemblies and the House of Reps, 35 for Senate, I think 40 for presidency. We're working on that now. Samson Itodo is here, he's with Yaga. Their organization actually got to sponsor a bill in the National Assembly aimed at reducing the age of eligibility for elective office. So this bill has scaled through both chambers of the National Assembly and the majority of state assemblies. So now we're waiting on presidential assent, and I'm going to use this opportunity to appeal to everyone present in this room. Through your organizations, please also join us in appealing to the President to assent to this bill so we can create a better sense of inclusion for young people and ensure that our democracy is more representative. In 2015, there was a change of government. That was the first time that we had an incumbent lose an election in Nigeria, a presidential election. And a major reason that happened was because young people decided that they were going to play an active role. I served on 2 committees in our presidential campaign council, and we had thousands of young people volunteer from across the country, going from house to house, telling people to register to vote, campaigning for our candidate. So yesterday on Twitter, someone said votes don't matter, and that's why he's not interested in joining the political process. And I said, that's something they tell you so you don't vote. Because really, if votes didn't matter, we wouldn't have won in 2015. We were able to do that because we worked together to attain a critical mass and see that change happened at the ballot. So it's been a clear example of what can happen if young people come together and concentrate our energy on actually achieving change in our country. And I hope that it's something we'll be able to sustain. I've been told that I have very little time left, so hopefully we'll speak more as we proceed.
For sure, we will speak more. Thank you very much for this. The ideas you, Rinsola, are thinking about what we can do.
Okay, thank you. So as I said the other time, to encourage more young people to join the political process, we need to remove constitutional barriers to participation. And there's a campaign in my country, presently the Not Too Young to Run campaign, which has also been adopted by other countries with similar issues. We're working towards removing legal barriers that ensure that young people are excluded from seeking political office. Within the party system, as I mentioned earlier, there are a number of us working within the party to make it more friendly for young people. The party was formed roughly in 2013, and since then we've been doing a lot of advocacy to ensure that party policies are more youth-friendly. So as a result of that, since we formed this government, when the party puts up, say, a committee for an issue, we ensure youth representation in it. I've served on 2 committees so far. We've had other young people, and another thing we've been able to do is make them understand that the term youth refers to both young men and young women, and there is a very serious problem with representation of young women, so we've also been trying to counter that. Then some weeks ago I met with the chairman of my party, and it was essentially on this topic. One thing I mentioned is this: in Nigeria we have a Ministry of Women Affairs, and naturally the minister is female. So I raised the point. I said we also have a Ministry of Youth, but the minister is hardly ever a young person. I don't think we've actually had somebody who fits into that definition of youth being our minister. So if you're bringing someone who is decades older, does not really understand what we go through, then how are we certain that this person who is supposed to safeguard our interests will actually be able to? So we're asking for that. Give us the Ministry of Youth Development, the way women have the Ministry for Women Affairs. Give us the Ministry of Communication and ICT, because this is a field where a lot of young Nigerians participate in, and they would have the requisite experience to be able to put forward policies that would be more meaningful to young people if it's young people in charge of that ministry. Party positions, my party is in the process of Congress at this moment. So we're also encouraging our young people to run not just for the office of the youth leader, but to recognize other offices where their skills can be brought to bear. Because we cannot all put ourselves in one box that says you have to be a youth leader, or for women to only say I can only be a woman leader. It doesn't work that way. We're not going to change anything for anybody that way. Then minus the party itself, now with the Not Too Young to Run bill about to be signed into law, hopefully, we've also been talking to the party regarding affirmative action. In Nigeria, nomination forms are free for women. Young people are also at an economic disadvantage. As far as I'm concerned, the political system is made to work for wealthy older men. So minus just having a bill that says young people can run, we also need to have workable policies that make running realistic. The cost of forms back home is about $2 million for Parliament, the House of Representatives. In dollars, it's well over $5,000. And a lot of us don't have jobs. And even those who have jobs are not very well paid most of the time. So women have concessions. Let young people have concessions. We're not saying give us forms for free, but I think a discount would be sensible. And as young women, we can benefit from the free forms for women, but then we're not going to leave the young men behind. We're all in this together. So then also elective offices appointments. I work for the Speaker of the Nigerian Parliament. There are a number of young people working for principal officers of the APC government, even at state level. But as I said earlier, the level of inclusion is not satisfactory. And we're trying to ensure that going into the election process again, we're able to renegotiate our stand. Because it's one thing to just say young people come and support this government. They need to see that the government actually does also appreciate that support by giving them a seat at the table table when the government is formed. And minus that empowerment, it's a huge issue, the economic condition. So we have some programs back home, Empower, target set at empowering young people and providing safety nets for the most economically disadvantaged. But in addition to that, I'm an Oliver Twist, I'll always ask for more. We need our government to do more to ensure that young people are empowered. I'm almost out of time again. So yeah, and then we also work, personally I have an ideology, yeah? It's this, we're all joining politics as young people to ensure that the field is better for other young people. So irrespective of what party a person belongs to, as long as you're a young person and your head is in the right place, I can work with you. So we have like groups where we come together as young people in politics to discuss issues within our respective parties. One thing we were able to do in APC was to get young people on the board of trustees. I, along with 2 other people, got appointed to that. We're trying to see if we can replicate that in other political parties in Nigeria also. So it doesn't just have to be one party, and the gains we're recording don't have to be just within our party alone. We're trying to get other young people on board, talking to other leaders in other political parties, and making them understand that this is a national issue, and it's time for young people to be represented.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll take Esther's comments first. Talking about age barriers, I agree completely. They're totally discriminatory and they have no place in our society, since any society without justice and without equity makes very little sense, and we need to work for that. I also agree with reviewing the charter. On godfatherism and monetization, it's a discussion we have often. Politics is very expensive, as I said earlier, and usually as young people we're not able to afford a lot of these expenses unless we pool resources. And even at that, one man who has been in the system for a long time can easily outspend a young person, even if you have 50 young people donating funds for you regularly. So it's a huge problem that we're contending with. Godfatherism, monetization. One thing that some people have been calling for back home is to have direct primaries as opposed to the current system, because this current system enables godfathers to have absolute power over the delegates that they send to conventions to elect candidates. So unless we have direct primaries, we're only going to be paying lip service to this for as long as we continue to complain about it. Ma'am, on young men and young women, classifying barriers and highlighting solutions. Yes, we have the APC Young Women Forum back home. I am currently the acting president. And we started that because we realized that when we have events for young people in the party, we had very few young women showing up. So I didn't feel happy being the only woman in the room or the only woman amongst so many young men. We needed to have other young women and to cultivate that political awareness in the population of young women in Nigeria. I think, yeah, if we don't have representation, my father used to say something. He would say that you cannot shave a man's head in his absence. As long as we don't have representation, decisions taken on our behalf are not going to fully represent the issues that we go through. They're not going to be able to tackle those challenges because we did not contribute to that process. So as long as we talk about youth, we can talk about all sorts of issues. When young women sit and we talk, if you have a room full of young men and they're talking about issues with young people, you're never going to hear people mention something like rape. It's something that we deal with, that we have first-hand experience of. And that is why we need to have young women at the table. We talk about sexual and reproductive health. Our young men don't really promote such things. They could talk about empowerment, but as women, there is a perspective we bring to the table that we need to be sustained in every single meeting. And for as long as we are not involved in the process, that is not going to happen. So I make it a point to try to mobilize as many young women as possible. There is nothing wrong with joining politics. Forget what anybody says. We need to be represented to ensure that the policies that our governments and parties churn out work for us. These are the people who make decisions that will affect our lives and the lives of generations before us. And it's time for us to take a stand and insist on being present when these decisions are being made. Focusing on... Thank you. My brother from Senegal talked about focusing on parliament. In my state, for instance, we have 26 people in the State House of Assembly. In the National Assembly, both chambers put together, that's about 469 people. So say in my state, presently we have just 2 women, but still, 2019, we're able to manage to get up to 5. It's easier to push for that kind of policy at state level, even if we're not able to get it at the national level. We had a Nigerian state, I think that was AKT, passed the Gender and Equal Opportunity Bill before, some years back. They were able to do that at state level without necessarily waiting for the National Assembly to do it. So if we're able to get more young people into parliament at state level and at federal level and ensure better gender representation, then we can actually have laws that cater to real issues that we're dealing with. So I'm also encouraging everyone back home, if you know somebody who is a good community mobilizer, or if you believe that this is a role that you can play, then please join the fray. Throw your hats or your scarves or your hijabs into the ring and run for office. We can get it done. Please. Then intergenerational dialogue, Samson, then a practical framework for transition. I believe a lot in mentorship. I have mentors, I have a flair for legislative work. So most of my mentors, one has been a Speaker of a State House of Assembly. He's currently in the House of Representatives now. I have another who was a Commissioner for Youth and Education. He's the Publicity Secretary of my party now. Mentorship is very important, and I'm young, so a lot of things that I've not experienced, I have an understanding of because I'm being mentored by older people who are more experienced in the political field. So we need to encourage mentorship as much as possible. So Samson, we're both in Nigeria, you do great work for youth advocacy and advancement. So perhaps when we get back home, we could sit together and develop a framework for a mentorship system that will actually work, because I'm also very passionate about this. Minus the personal relationships that we may have with these people, there are others who also want this, but maybe have not quite figured out a way to get their feet in the door. These are all issues we're looking into back home also, the various youth forums in our political parties, and we're interfacing with our government. Intergenerational dialogue, we were with the Vice President some weeks back talking about Not Too Young to Run, enhanced representation for young people. As much as possible within the party also, we engage our leaders, try to make them see the need to actually include young people in forming policies when we're doing different committee works, and we've been able to achieve some progress with that, because I think for the last 5 or 6 committees, there's always representation for young people, both young men and young women. So the advocacy will take time. It's like the gender advocacy also, but I believe in due course we will reap benefits. Okay, one more thing, last thing, I promise. On gender, Esther, you said something about young people mostly doing the beating of their godfathers. And I'm going to draw an analogy with gender affirmative action policies in political parties back home. We have this process of selecting delegates from the ward level. During ward congresses, if you want to be a delegate, you stand in front, people line up behind you. So the number of people who choose you determines who emerges as a delegate. And usually they say that out of 3 delegates, there should be 1 woman. But one thing we've come to realize is representation on paper does not actually translate to your interest being protected. Because usually those women who emerge are either wives or sisters or cousins or mothers of some leader in that ward. So when their godfather says you're going to go there, you're going to vote for this man, when they get to the convention grounds, that's what they do. So as I said earlier, direct primaries, we've all been calling for it. If we're able to get that done, then we can reduce the influence, the undue overbearing influence of those godfathers. And I hope that in time we'll be able to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we go.
It's time for young people to get involved. No excuses, no delays. Get in there and get involved.